You ready? Okay. So welcome to Green Zone Training. Glad that everyone can make it that is here. I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight. We are recording these sessions, so please keep your voices to a minimum and wait until Aaron asks for questions. Also, this session is being recorded, so it will be available on our Blackboard site by the end of the week. In order to find the presentation, you'll need to go to HR Blackboard, click on Professional Development on the left-hand tab, and click the 2015 Spring Calendar. And just again, reminder that we are recording, so keep your voices down, wait till questions are being asked, and without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Aaron for some Green Zone training. Thank you.
Thanks, Tisha. Good morning. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm really excited to do this presentation. And like Tisha said, there'll be questions throughout the presentation, so feel free, if you have any questions, just jump up right on in. The purpose of this is just to raise an awareness about an issue that's happening across our country with student veterans, both active duty and veteran. And the goal of this presentation really is to kind of work with how can we ask the question, how can we make this situation better for our students? As you see, I'm the only one here. Wilson had a prior engagement, and as well as Tracy, but if you have any questions, feel free to contact any of them. All three of us have worked on this presentation and developed it, talked about it, how to make it better. Feel free to give us any feedback using hashtag GreenZone, Facebook, Twitter, whichever you prefer, or email. We would love some feedback on how to make this, get your perspective on it. So I want to start with how this idea all came about. When I worked with Veterans Upward Bound program, me and Wilson talked a lot about the challenges that this group faces that are very unique to what me and Wilson faced. Both of us not being non-veterans, it really was empowering to see the challenges that these students were overcoming. And I just so happened to go across my Facebook, a friend of mine in college who was a Marine who was deployed to Afghanistan, and this is what he posted, this picture. If you can't see, it's a typical weather in Afghanistan. It's a sandstorm. So this is every day. This is what he wakes up to. And how different, just everyday life that we all take for granted, how different it is for civilians than it is for veterans. And that really got us thinking about how different they're coming back to when they from the deployment, and the institutions that they're coming to, and how different, and the mindset that they must be facing, the challenges, and how unique their situations really are compared to civilians. And that got us thinking about what can we do, how can we make this better, what can we do to create an awareness about this unique challenge that they face. And this is where the idea of Green Zone came about. So before we get started, just be advised, this training program is designed to create an awareness about experiences and issues faced by student veterans, service members, and those in transition from military life to college life. This presentation contains video clips and/or photographs that may be difficult to view. Please feel free to excuse yourself during the portion of the presentation or talk to a member of the staff at the conclusion of the presentation. So if some of this is a bit sensitive, and it will be, it's okay to leave. There will be maybe some profanity, maybe some, like I said, some visually issues that may bring back some things. So just be warned, because we want to make sure that we get to the root of the issue about all this. So the presentation is going to cover, one, just some demographics. We're going to take you through an actual military experience, the transition that occurs from base to campus, talk a little bit more about our older veterans, our newer veterans, the pre-9/11 veteran students, as well as our older veterans, and then give you some tools, some best practices, and some scenarios to work with this population. And then any questions at the end. So, what is Green Zone? Green Zone is like a safe space in the military for military terms. This is where active combat duty guys and girls can go, can go and know that they are safe. This is a safe space. So that's the premise of the Green Zone, is that we want to create an awareness of safe, open communication, open dialogue, where veterans can feel safe or comfortable in an area where they may not feel comfortable. At the end of this presentation, we want volunteers. We want to rally faculty and staff of this college to get together and make a Green Zone volunteer. A Green Zone volunteer pledges to be supportive of the Green Zone program and make our CCC military and veteran student populations more comfortable. What does a Green Zone volunteer look like, or who is a Green Zone volunteer? It's a college staff and faculty member who identify themselves as someone who is aware of the unique issues and concerns faced by student, veterans, and service members. Someone who is available to assist the student, has completed the Green Zone training. Volunteers are not expected to solve problems, but to have a sympathetic ear. Someone who can help the student find the appropriate resources for a problem they're facing. The training goals are to educate you on the unique challenges student veterans face in higher ed, provide information, data, and perspectives on the dynamic effect military experiences play in higher education, create an awareness of the important roles faculty and staff play in providing support and engagement for student veterans and service members, initiate the conversation amongst college faculty and staff regarding campus services for servicemen and veteran students. So we want to provide support for this population, create an awareness about what's going on, and then bring everyone to the table and say, okay, so what are we doing to make this transition easier for them, or how can we make it easier for them? So our outcomes are develop competent volunteers that will pledge to provide a supportive environment for military servicemen and veterans. Inspire participants to start the conversation, how can we expand the improving military and veteran student service? Develop some best practices and supportive services. So, let's talk about some demographics. Who is a student veteran or service member? Student veterans and service members are a diverse group of individuals from all branches of the military. They range in age, ethnicity, and gender. They've served during times of war and during peace. They have different educational goals and more likely will have a family. There's just a clip of some of the occupations of some of active duty and veterans. And then some stats for you. And North Carolina has deployed 50,886 troops to OEF, OIF since 9/11, just North Carolina alone. There are more than 743,377 veterans living in North Carolina present. There are 100,000 active duty North Carolinian residents. This was furnished in 2012 by the Department of the VA. 91% of North Carolina veterans are male, and 9% are female. More than 1/3 of North Carolina veterans served in Vietnam, and 28% served in one or more both Gulf War eras. 475,000 served in one war, 70,000 served in 2 wars, and 2,600 served in 3 wars. So there's a large dispensation amongst who served when. A lot of older population. Okay, just some terms that as we go through the presentation you'll need to know, you'll hear over and over. Serviceman is a generic term which encompasses active duty, National Guard, and Reserve personnel. It's everyone. Term veteran is any individual who served in the U.S. military regardless of length, time, and or location of service. So if you serve, you're a veteran. DOD, it refers to the Department of Defense. OEF, which we mentioned earlier, is Operation Enduring Freedom. It's the war in Afghanistan. OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom, war in Iraq. OND, Operation New Dawn, official end to OIF and combat ops in Iraq. Those are the more popular ones that are in the news today. MOS is a military occupational specialty, so after you complete boot camp, you go into training for your MOS. So what are you going to do in the military? TAP, Transitional Assistance Program, which is what is used for funding for education. GI Bill, government issued bill of veteran benefits such as cash payments for tuition and living expenses. All right, any questions thus far? Great. So let's go into give you some perspective about what the military experience looks like. First thing you need to know is the mindset, and this is the big part of the presentation. Here we have the emotional cycle of deployment based upon the military experience. Over here you see in the yellow the deployment cycle from the pre-deployment, deployment, sustainment, redeployment, and post-deployment. That's the cycle that veterans and active duty go on. The part that we want to focus on is the emotional part. So as they're going through this cycle of deployment, sustainment, and redeployment, what are they feeling? What's going on the inside? What are the internal conflicts that they're feeling? You'll notice that they go through anticipation of loss. They feel a sense of detachment, usually from their family and friends. Maybe a bit of disorganization as they're trying to figure out what's going on, where they're at, and then they start to stabilize to the situation. And then their tour is over, or whatever they're doing, and they're sent home, and they start to anticipate that return. Depending upon what they're doing, where they are, or the current situation, they may be redeployed. So then they may be reintegrating back home, or reintegrating or preparing for another deployment. So there's all these feelings and all these emotions and all these things going on while they're operating as soldiers, but also as people. So we start from the beginning, the military experience, right at the deployment. We consider this, they're physically present with all of us, but psychologically, they're wherever they're going. They may be anticipating some notifications, they're preparing, they're doing massive trainings. So even though, like I said, they're here on stateside, they may not be thinking about what's going on here as they're preparing themselves to what's to come. This is an actual quote from a staff member here at CCCC. She's a spouse, and she's giving her account about what happened with her husband's deployment. In 2004 was the first time, and I was working when he actually called and told me. My initial reaction, I cried, obviously. The other deployments that he had gone on were just training deployments, but this is a whole different animal. Your first reaction is you're sad because he's going to war, and then you go through all the different types of reactions. You feel sad, then you realize you have to prepare for the worst. This can get really difficult because if they're working, if they're going to school, if you have families, friends, how you prepare for these things as you're transitioning to deployment. So once they get to deployment, they're psychologically present here stateside, but physically absent. So they're there, but they're thinking about what's going on over here. And that can present quite a bit of challenge. Deployments can last 6 to 18 months at a time. Multiple deployments can occur. Some serve more than one deployment before being discharged from the military. More than 977,500 have experienced 2 or more deployments. So generally, you're going to experience more than one. Here's another quote from a staff member. While he was deployed, I would email him every night. Even though he didn't email me back, or if he couldn't check his email, just knowing that when he could log on, knowing that everything was okay at home, helped him to focus on getting the bad guys. That's what counts. I don't read newspapers. I don't watch the news. That's not something I can do while he's gone. That's how I got through it. So our job as family and friends is to make sure that the individual knows that everything is okay here so that they can focus on what's going on over there. Sometimes that's for a survival skill. So think about it. As you're in this high-stress, hyper-vigilant state, and you're not wanting to be there because you're thinking about what's going on at home, and then you have to get adjusted to this lifestyle, how different that is, what a different perspective as civilians it is for us. Some tough realities about combat. Fear in combat is omnipresent. It's everywhere. Even though no one talks about it, doesn't want to share their feelings, everyone's scared. Unit members will be injured and killed due to communication breakdowns. Leadership failures will be perceived. Combat impacts every soldier mentally and emotionally. Combat is lasting mental health effects. It can. Soldiers are afraid to admit that they have a mental health problem. Deployments place a tremendous strain on families. Combat environment is harsh and demanding. Combat poses moral and ethical challenges. Challenges specifically of the OEF, OIF, no clearly defined front line or rear areas. It's a highly ambiguous environment, it's complex and changing missions. They were long deployments, a lot of repeated deployments, and the environment was very harsh. So again, let's think back. You're in this constant state of hypervigilance, and this is what you can expect. Never really a place to settle in or sustain or get comfortable, really. Okay, so I want you to watch this video. This is an actual clip from a green zone in Afghanistan.
It's an early morning in Kajaki, Afghanistan. A platoon of Marines with 1st Battalion, 6th Marine Regiment are awakened by the sound of mortars impacting their position near the Helmand River. Patrol Base, Georgetown. Without time to fully dress, the Marines rush outside to engage the enemy.
Everybody throws gear on, runs out. We get our positions established, and squad leaders take control.
Like gets you out of nowhere. I'm in a sleeping bag still, so all of a sudden you hear the flare going off, RPG, then fires just start going off.
Just to the northwest of us, across the Helmand River, they have a ridge line up there, and there's caves in the ridge line that they'll crawl into, and they engage us from there. We're the most forward unit in the green zone from 5 White House Front Battalion. So with us here, we lock down the green zone on this side.
IDF, and then 30 mics hitting. It just got really bad real quick.
Tree! Hit the tree!
When we started going Winchester, started losing ammo. By the time after a couple hours, we were probably had 100 still left for 50 cal, and that was it.
Reloading! Hey, gunshot right here! Get it! Get it! Sniper!
Hey, we took a round right there. Gunshot.
IDF 30mm grenades hitting inside the compound, getting close, real close. I mean, we took a casualty, took a couple casualties. You hear about people being battle tested. This one tested the boys.
We're still taking indirect. We're still taking small arms. We have to get him on the bird as fast as possible.
Where's the bird landing?
It's the only place. We have to be fast. All right?
Been one hell of a day. I mean, you're thinking, yeah, regular patrol any other day. It didn't happen in that way. I mean, I definitely teach a lot of people, like, everyone's got to be ready from now on. I mean, you never know what's going to happen from now on. We lost one person, injuries. I mean, who knows what's going to happen next. We still got some time left.
Another day, man. Another day.
Well, I mean, hopefully whoever sees this will actually notice what actually happens. I mean, at the end of the day, we're the ones out here fighting this fight and then just breaking hearts sometimes.
So what are some initial reactions from all that? What are your thoughts?
I don't know how young that kid was. You know? Was he 20? Maybe?
Probably.
Something like that.
18. When they graduate high school, they can go on this. Not really.
Think about the emotional stress that they're under at such a young age.
Absolutely.
Being able to handle that and manage what they're feeling and maybe not able to communicate it with the soldiers that are there.
Or having the time to.
Right.
I imagine that if you're in that kind of state, that there's limited time to actually debrief all that stuff because you're still thinking survival skills, let's get out of here. So, so they may not have time to even think about those things until they get back. Anything else? Yes.
I think about this like stark contrast between that environment and then being at home and just how difficult that would be to make that transition. And when this is sort of what you're used to, and then you get home and it's so very different.
Very different. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just said that because that brings us to post-deployment when they're transitioning back home. They're physically present here, but they're psychologically still there. And that has a lot to do with what Daisha said about that debriefing period. So back to another quote. We were taught that you don't ask questions. If he wants to provide information, that's fine, but don't add more stress as he goes through the decompression process. I just tried to make it business as usual. That's the best way to go through all the different transitions. Make it as normal as possible. But you also see the changes in him. And all you can do is be a sounding board, staying positive as possible. That's really all you can do. Now, as a family, as a friend, that's got to be really tough for all of us to see our loved one go through something like that and not really having much we can do. So, what are some post-deployment challenges? There are 4 specific ones that I want to talk about: physical, cognitive, emotional, social, and spiritual. You'll notice the picture, and I don't know if everyone can see that at the other campuses, but it's a picture of a couple with, looks like this gentleman just got back from deployment holding a baby, holding a newborn, and the sign says, "Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but my name's Connor, and I'm your baby." That's got to be tough. Physical. As they're decompressing, as they're going through these experiences, certain triggers that may trigger some of this emotion that maybe they're either not ready for, they've never experienced, or don't know how to deal with, are high traffic areas, crowds, feeling unarmed, or access to alcohol. What's one of the first things we do when they get back? Let me buy you a beer. Cognitive. They may have some issues with feeling loyalty to friends versus their union. Now, that's really interesting because I love my wife, but this guy kept me alive. Secrecy versus disclosure, depending upon what they feel like they can talk about or they want to talk about with their loved ones. Maybe they have some feelings of regret. Maybe life is too simple here and they feel bored. Maybe they're having thoughts of loss, the simplicity to civilian life, or maybe it's complex to them. In the Army, everything is set before you. You're given orders, you follow orders. Here, and especially in higher education, it's on you. It's your path. You have to decide, make the decision. You have to learn to navigate yourself. Social. Maybe they're feeling some anxieties as they're separated from their buddies, or they're overwhelmed by that. Maybe their family doesn't really understand what they did or what their goal was over there. Maybe they feel alienated because of what they did. Emotional. Maybe they're struggling with some issues with grief or anger because of what happened. They're feeling unsafe because they don't have because they're unarmed. Feeling guilty for what they had to do. Feeling withdrawal from or rush. The state of hypervigilance is now gone, so they're feeling flat. Maybe feeling numb. Spiritual. Maybe they start asking questions about why their buddy died, or when they died, or what happens. Maybe this is really changing their purpose in life. Maybe they're having some questions about their faith, about how God is going to make this all work out. Maybe this is conflicting with their moral values about what they had to do and what they did do. Questions about all that. The major question I want to ask is, now that you have a good perspective about it, how does that, you can see how that really does impact our college and our environment. What are some thoughts, or what are some experiences you've seen with active duty or military veterans that they've expressed to you, or you've heard or observed, or you've been thinking about?
As an advisor, I had an advisor come in. The first time I met him, honestly, he was just drugged out of his mind, just from whatever kind of trauma that he was trying to deal with mentally. And so just to maintain that cognizance, I think a lot of times, to have to function that way.
Absolutely.
In that fog.
Think about this. So if we put someone who's been deployed back into a classroom with traditional age students, 18 to 22, and with traditional 18 to 22 issues that occur at that stage in people's lives with someone who's experienced this, how alienated they must feel. And then we want them to engage into a classroom with critical thinking and discussion, how different of an environment that must feel. Right? Any thoughts about that?
I think, first of all, that's a good point. But what I was thinking about is, a lot of the veterans that I've come across really, from those experiences, look at the classroom either like they're very grateful to have that experience and be there, or it's easy for them, having dealt with some other type of stresses. But what you say is a valid point to address that, because the open discussion is maybe something that's relatively new to a military person. The fact that you want to have opposing opinions,
right,
be out in the open,
right,
and discuss that as a group might be kind of a new thing.
That's a good point about the, it's relative to what they've experienced and what's going on, maybe in the classroom. So that's a really different point to add.
And if I can tag on to that?
Yes, please. All right.
Yeah, just really quick. So you've presented them in a way that they almost seem damaged, and we're not emphasizing the fact that they're bringing a lot of life experiences that they can contribute to the classroom.
Absolutely.
And that we ought to pull on that and not focus on what may or may not happen, in a damaging sort of way. But pull on their experiences and let them use their skills that the military taught them, whether it be leadership, whether it be collaborative working. We pull on those experiences, so we welcome them into our classroom instead of ostracizing them in our classroom.
Absolutely, that's another good point about the positive and very different mentality that they have when they come to the classroom. It can be difficult to kind of gauge between where they're at in their process, or where they're at in their mind, and so just being a sounding board, like you said, and being a support unit to them, I think it's critical. Ashley? Okay, so let's talk about the transition from base to campus. Okay, so this clip is Natasha Patterson. She was a Marine vet, and she's talking about her unique experience as she transitioned from military life into college life.
Well, my name is Natasha Patterson. I am a program coordinator at Central Carolina Community College for Upper Bound Math Science. I am a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I served for 8 years during the Desert Storm time frame. And I'm a mother of one great college student. My hope was to go to college out of high school, like most people. However, my mother is from Costa Rica, and first generation, so I would have been first generation, and not only just first generation, but she's from another country, so her idea of America was to work. So she didn't know how to encourage me out of high school to go to college. She didn't have the knowledge to help pursue that. I was a very good student, and I wanted to go to school. So the military, you know, had that option of helping you go to school, pay for your school with the GI Bill, those kinds of things. So that was my initial goal for joining the military, was to eventually get a college degree. What the offer was that there was a tuition assistance program when you were active duty, and there was a 75% tuition assistance that you could get for the classes that you took while you were on active duty. I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. On that base, they had Campbell University as a satellite campus, and I went there and I registered, got my classes. When you're active duty, you actually have to get permission from your CO or your company first sergeant to make sure that you can take the classes, that it doesn't interfere with your work schedule at all. My position was in a comm center, and I worked 12-hour shifts. They offered and allowed for me to leave work in order to take my classes while I was on campus. So the portion of taking classes and what steps I needed to take were kind of already mapped out for us. So they were pretty easy with that. The money was there through the military, so you didn't get to have the understanding of really, you know, financial aid and all those other things that I ran into after I got out of Japan. I got orders to go to Okinawa, Japan for a year. My goal again was always to be in school, so some kind of way to make sure that I was taking classes. When I got to Okinawa, I pursued that there as well. However, Campbell University was not a satellite campus on their campus. The University of Maryland was a satellite campus. So then I had to apply to the University of Maryland satellite campus on Okinawa in an effort to take classes. And so once I got out of the Marine Corps, it was a difficult transition. I didn't know where to go. When the good thing about being in the military is that everything that I needed was there on my base. So I knew where to go, how to navigate that. When I got out, I didn't know what school I should use. I didn't know what programs that they had. I mean, my kind of got discouraged early on. Just trying to focus on taking care of my kid and working and doing those things that I needed to do as an adult. And so it took me about maybe another 6 or 7 years to get into school. There was really no acknowledgement of my veteran status. I was just another non-traditional student. So I didn't get any information on vet services or where I needed to go. By this time, I didn't have my GI Bill anymore. I had utilized my GI Bill money at the community college. So there was no, there was none of that. There was no veteran-friendly academic advising or anybody that, and if there were, nobody directed me to that. So I didn't have any of that experience. I was just a student, a non-traditional student. Although initially I went because I wanted to go to school, I would never trade the fact that I served my country for 8 years as a Marine for anything. So the discipline that I gained, even though, like I said initially, a lot of things are already mapped out for you, my level of don't quit, not giving up, working together with other people is something that you get from your experience as a military person. And so I had that drive. And so that's what, although I was a single mom, I was working a full-time job, and I was a full-time student. By the time I got to the university, I was taking the full 12 units. There was no quit. There was no, and that came from my dedication from learning what I learned and how my survival skills and being able to be flexible that you get from being a military person. So my Marine Corps years helped me to understand that I was going to persist and be disciplined in whatever it is that I do.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the strengths that this population brings to our college. Veteran servicemen transitioning out of the military into higher education bring a really unique perspective. Their military training, their life experiences, established identity, and a more worldly view. This can be really positive in their educational experience as well as for our classrooms. Skills taught in the military help students become more successful. They are leadership driven. They are extremely motivated, as we all know. They have excellent time management skills, which is critical, especially for new students first filling out and getting engaged in college. They have an excellent work ethic, and they know how to manage stress. These are skills that a lot of our ACA classes are trying to build with students that they already have, so they're an excellent asset. Active duty and full-time student difficulties. Deployment notification process and possible class withdrawal. So this is a difficulty for active duty or reservists that might face, because if they're getting deployed or they're getting activated, they may not know exactly when what that timeline looks like. So they may not know when to withdraw from class. They may not know if they can take that class because of when they're going to get called. Coping with unit preparation versus class responsibilities. In the process of deployment, they have a series of trainings that they have to go to. So they might miss class or study groups or activities that they want to be involved in, but because of this, it creates a conflict. They have a loyalty to family versus college friends. So obviously, if you're getting deployed, you want to spend as much time with your loved ones as possible. Again, this becomes a role strain between what they should do and preparation for deployment. If they're experiencing any romantic relationships, as I said before, experiences during deployment versus college experience. We've been talking about how very different that experience can be. Campus perception of military experience. So depending upon the political climate, what's going on in the world, there may be some bad perception about what happened, and they may feel that. Do they feel that? What can we do? Some other transitional difficulties from college is military skills versus civilian skills. We don't do an excellent job of translating what they did in the military to what they can do here. That correlates to college credit, and that's being worked on obviously as the best we can, but we don't do a good enough job of giving them credit for the certifications and the skills that they do in the military to what they can get credit for in college. Things to keep in mind for your students: they may find loud noises to be disturbing, may become anxious with changes in the classroom, may have excessive absences because of the things we talked about, may have symptoms of trauma from military experiences. Any questions about that? The three big things that I want to equip you with are some tools or some indicators is the big hot buttons nowadays: PTSD, TBI, and MST. These are the big things that are circulating that I want everyone to just have a general information and knowledge about, so that we can make sure that if you have a student that has expresses some concern about this, or you're seeing some signs, that we can all know what to do.
My name's Skylar. I was in the Army, active duty, 6 years. I think the overall experience, being in a combat zone, stays with you forever. I think my vehicle got blown up directly maybe 4 times, and indirectly, a handful of times. So I think there's like an anxiety that sticks with you about stuff like that. Getting out of the military, it's scary, you know, because you have this whole life that you learned. For me, it was 6 years active duty in an infantry unit. Now I have to all of a sudden go be a civilian. I didn't have any Army buddies around, so I didn't have people that I could talk to and hang out with. And I kind of felt alienated from the civilian world because I didn't share anything in common. When I got out, I didn't think that I had PTSD, you know. I almost thought like PTSD was something that people who couldn't handle the intensity of their job had. And when I got out, I didn't think that I had any issues or mental health issues that would affect me in the civilian life. I found that I was having trouble controlling my emotions sometimes, my anger, my frustrations. It was easier for me to get frustrated. And when I did get frustrated, I took it more seriously, as if something serious was going on. If I was running late to a movie, I felt like I was running late to a mission, and people's lives were at stake. But that wasn't the reality. That personality characteristic, that intensity, that drive makes you succeed in the military, but it doesn't in the civilian world. It alienates you. And I had to back off and let that go. And that was hard. It took a lot of other people coming up to me and telling me, hey, I think you have PTSD, or hey, I think that you have things going on that you need to talk about or you need help with. And I say, no, I don't think I have PTSD. What could I have PTSD from? And I was always thinking there has to be some specific event. I don't have a constant nightmare where I wake up and I'm reliving a specific situation. I'm not constantly bunkered down in my house behind sandbags, you know, waiting for the invading army to attack. No, I don't have any of those things going on. But there is something kind of wrong, you know? I do have this agitation, this anxiety, this hypervigilance from time to time. Maybe something's not right. So I went down to the VA and they asked me, they said, have you ever been blown up before? Or have you ever been exposed to a blast? And I said, yeah, quite a few times. And they were like, how many? And I told them, and they were like, wow, well, you probably have traumatic brain injury. They helped with my memory and concentration issues and how to regulate my mood and stuff like that. And that was a really productive experience because at one point I felt hopeless. I felt like I'm on the road to not recovering. I'm on the road, I'm on a downward spiral into some abyss of like, you know, mental disability. But working with speech pathology and TBI clinic at the VA they had me turned around quick. In a few months I was in school. I go to the Boulder Vet Center, but seems to be one located within proximity of every VA hospital. My therapist was an infantry soldier. He was deployed to Vietnam twice. And speaking with him, working with him, it made me feel comfortable to talk about my stories because I knew they were familiar to him. He knew the same emotions that I knew. He had the same feelings I had. Vet centers are great because they have this group dynamics aspect where you meet all these other combat vets. And I think that requirement alone creates a little bit of brotherhood that makes me feel comfortable walking into a group because I say, these guys know what I'm talking about. They know what I know, they've seen what I've seen. If I'm gonna open up or feel uncomfortable or be in an awkward situation, it's not gonna be awkward because they have those same feelings. And any advice they have for me is gonna be beneficial. And you know, I can take it to heart because it's coming from somebody with the same experiences. You're a civilian now. And the best way to, I think, come to peace with all of that stuff, the best way to come to terms with all of your experiences is to talk about it, is to find other vets in the community, is to go to a local vet center down to the VA and talk about those experiences. The first thing I would say to anybody is it's not abnormal. You know, all the issues you're dealing with, you're not alone. You are not the only one. You're not weak. And the second thing I would say is go down to the VA. There's no better place to get help for a veteran than a place that is employed by veterans, run by veterans, and is designed to work around veterans. I want to be a behavioral and cognitive therapist that works with combat veterans. So I'd go from Skylar, the high school dropout, to, you know, staff sergeant, to You know, Skylar, the rugby player, to doctorate, you know, and that's a path that I couldn't have even started without the VA, you know. They set you up for the road to success there.
PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is a type of anxiety. It can occur after a person has gone through an extreme emotional trauma that involved threat of injury or death. PTSD is experienced by some, but don't assume it's by all. It's important to have knowledge of PTSD, but do not expect that every service member will have these symptoms. Student veterans may sit in the back of the classroom so they can have a clear view of everything around them, be easily startled by noises, pins dropping, whispering, be withdrawn from class discussion, have difficulty maintaining emotional control during topics. TBI, traumatic brain injury, is a blow or jolt to the head or penetrating head injury that disrupts the function of the brain. There's different levels between mild and severe. It's important to have some knowledge of TBI, but do not expect that all service members will have TBI. Common difficulties include attention, memory, reasoning or problem solving, hyperverbal speech, expressive speech or language problems, difficulty organizing your thinking, difficulty processing complex thoughts. We're going to bypass this video for the sake of time, but this one specifically talks about military sexual trauma. This is a prevailing issue that we're seeing more and more cases of, not just with women, but also with men. MST is a sexual assault, sexual threat, bullying, unwanted touching or grabbing that occurred while in service. Some of the difficulties both female and male survivors may experience are strong emotions, feeling depressed, having intense, sudden emotional responses, feeling numbness, emotionally flat, or trouble feeling love or happiness. Trouble with attention, concentration, and memory, problems with alcohol or other drugs, drinking excessively, problems with relationships, feeling alone or not connected to because of, or with others. Suicide prevention. There's an Army initiative. Soldiers are taught to ask, care, and escort anyone who mentions suicide. Escort service member to a behavioral health care provider and never leave a friend alone. There's information right there that if you hear anything about that, you're welcome to do. But I just want to make a comparison here between the number of combat deaths, 426, versus the number of suicide deaths. It's very, very, very common, and it's a problem that we all need to be a part of. In the event that a student may experience being in crisis, please feel free to contact a counselor, as we'll sit with them, talk to them, and refer them to the appropriate mental health provider. We want to make sure that we're providing the best service that we can in a critical situation. Okay, so a little bit of information about pre-9/11 veterans. Older veterans may be returning to college for a number of reasons: unemployment, seeking further certification, or they're changing their career. Pre-9/11 vets may have special needs in comparison to younger vets because of funding, or medical issues, or they need referrals, or financial issues because they've been out of the service for a while. They've reestablished themselves. So their challenges are unique to their current situation and their occupation. Okay, so this is the section that I really wanted to make sure we had time for, is some skills, some best practices to use when you're working with these students. Some things that faculty and staff should know are: service members are having a normal reaction to an abnormal experience. No two veterans are alike. Each of us has had a different experience. Do not assume that you know my political beliefs, or just because I was in the military. I may or may not be ready to talk about my experiences. Trust can be an issue for me. Being friendly and listening can go a long way towards building trust. Do not be afraid of me. We are accustomed to being successful and may be too proud to ask for help. Some Questions that maybe if you want to start that dialogue or let them know that you're there as a supportive unit. So just some opening questions you can ask is, what's your branch of service? And how long were you in the military? How many deployments? When, where, how long? How has your experience at school been thus far? What was your job and where did you go? Just some really simple questions just to open up that dialogue. And they may be responsive, they may not be. But just knowing that you're there, you're extending that hand and maintaining that open line of dialogue, it goes a long way. It really does. My experience with Veterans Upward Bound, initially there was some distance that I had to overcome. But again, maintaining that open line of dialogue, eventually they open up, they warm up to you. They're filling you out, making sure that you're a trustworthy person. And then they start sharing their experience, their story with you. And it's amazing. It's amazing the challenges that they go through. Other questions are, how are you and your family doing? But do not ask if they've killed someone. And don't ask if they've been injured. Excuse me. Collectively, we can welcome vets home. We can express our appreciation for their service, offer to help with their transition to campus, so point them in the right direction, connect them with the right people, support with patience and listening, and understand that their experience as a civilian post-military may have been difficult. This is just a general note about privacy that some may, like I said, may not want their status to be brought to attention. They may not feel comfortable of others knowing what they did or where they did or what that they were a veteran at all. What can you do? Be respectful of a person's desire to disclose or not to disclose their veteran status. If you're interested in providing veterans in your class an opportunity to covertly disclose his or her status, you can hand out a note card during the first class to gather information about the student. Or speak with them after class, email, what have you. All right, so some scenarios. Let's go over some opportunities for you to put to use the skills that we've been talking about. Scenario A. A student comes to your office because he or she is experiencing problems with the GI Bill. Currently, there is a hold on the student's account, preventing he or she from registering for classes because of unpaid tuition. What advice do you give the student?
I send them straight to Tracy Gross because he's our Veterans Affairs coordinator.
Excellent. Something else you could do. Anyone from another campus? Raise your hand.
We don't have a VA representative on Harnett County campus full time. It would be hard to do anything besides pick up the phone and call Tracy.
Okay. Scenario B. A student reservist comes to your office and is anticipating being deployed. The student is unsure if the deployment will be before the end of the semester and is unaware of how to proceed. What should he or she do?
Reach out to the instructors.
Yes. Ashley?
I was going to ask a question in general. How does CCCC address that issue? Is it on a case-by-case basis, or do we have a policy that they can, leave and
It's a good question.
resolve it somehow?
I'm assuming it is case by case, and I would refer to Ken. Refer to Ken. Scenario C. A student veteran comes to you because she feels alone on campus. She was accustomed to being constantly surrounded by individuals who share her goals and values. Since she has come to campus, she has not met any similar individuals. She feels isolated and alone. How do you help the student?
Send them to Veterans Upward Bound.
Send them to Veterans Upward Bound. What are some other resources?
Also, I know that Tracy has this isn't really necessarily community exactly, but I know he has a listserv that he sends emails to his veterans, so that may be a way for this person to at least get, kind of within that network and maybe hear of some things going on or
Absolutely.
be able to connect with some other people.
Absolutely. Send them to Mike Neal. Maybe he can pair them up with the right organization. Pair them up with a success coach so they can get them plugged in with all the resources that we have available. We have lots of different pockets. We just need to make sure we're all sending them to the right places. Last one. You have an older veteran in your class. This individual is proud of their service as evident by the military insignia being worn. How do you encourage the veteran to share their experience during the class discussion without making them feel forced to engage?
Ask them if they want to share their experiences.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would just ask privately, maybe after class one day, say, hey, we're going to be talking about this next week. Would you be willing to, share some of your experience?
Absolutely. You can also maybe make it an open-ended question where there's not so much focus on military. Does anyone have a unique experience in their life they'd like to share? That way it's a cooperative discussion. Anything else? Okay, so does anyone have any questions now?
Aaron, I got a really quick question. So you started out talking about using quotes from a faculty member who was a spouse. So what do we do for the spouses who are also going through the transitions and the deployments? And I mean, what services are we extended to the spouses?
That's a really good
Because
question.
they're just as affected by deployments. They're as affected by deployments as the service member is.
Absolutely. That's a really good question. The same services that we provide. So in case of crisis, we would refer that individual to a counselor, plug them in with, does Tracy have a spousal listserv? Like military spouses?
Well, I don't know, but he would know whether people were receiving benefits based on, their dependency.
Okay.
So I don't know if they're included or not.
I would refer them to Tracy to see if he has any knowledge of any groups or anything. The success coaches, Mike Neal, maybe they can plug them in with a group that's has some military spouses. I'm not aware of any formalized process as of now, though, that what we do for military spouses.
Another question. Sure. Does Ben Cole still have his veterans organization that he heads up?
I don't think
like a veterans club kind of thing. Does he still do that?
I don't think so.
Okay. I think a new one is going to be started, but I think Ben's disbanded.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? The last thing I want to say is there's our contact information, so if you have any questions or concerns, please contact us. Other additional resources which we talk about, which would be the Veterans Upward Bound program, which is a great resource to get veterans paired together. Tracy, obviously, as well as Nicole Brown. Nicole is our Veterans Treatment Court Liaison, which is a new program that has been launched in Harnett County, and I'm sure she would love some input, love some shout out for if you have any questions about that component of our school. If there's no other questions, then I really, really appreciate everyone attending. I hope you got some information out of this. I would love to continue the conversation, so if anyone, again, has questions or continue this conversation, please contact me. Thank you so much for coming.